Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Angela Bailey, Executive Director of the Kensington Reston, an assisted living and memory care community set to open in early 2021. I'm very excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Majid Fotuhi. Dr. Fotuhi is a Harvard and Johns Hopkins trained neurologist and neuroscientist with over 25 years of neuroscience research, clinical work, and teaching experience. He is one of the foremost authorities in the field of memory, concussion, ADHD, Alzheimer's disease, and brain vitality in older adults. Dr. Fotuhi developed a multidisciplinary approach to treating brain function disorders. He's currently the medical director at Neurogrow Brain Fitness Center in McLean, Virginia, where he teaches patients and conducts clinical research. He also serves as an affiliate staff member at Johns Hopkins Medicine University and a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. He's written 3 books. His most recent work, Boost Your Brain, provides a complete program for increasing brain size and enhancing brain function. We'll be providing a copy for tonight's event of Boost Your Brain. And just a few housekeeping items before we begin. We would like for this to be interactive. So please feel free to use either the chat box or the Q&A box, and Dr. Fotuhi will answer your questions. Without further ado, I am honored to pass this over to Dr. Fotuhi.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for taking your time to participate in this seminar. My name is Majid Fotuhi, and I thank Angela for this nice introduction. Today, I want to tell you about how you can improve your memory and have a better, healthier brain. When I was a kid, my father told me that there was no limit in what my brain can do. He said, Majid, you can learn 7 languages, you can get an MD and a PhD, you can be a scientist, you can be a neurologist, you can do whatever you want. Your brain has no limits. And I thought he was exaggerating because 7 languages, that sounds like a lot. But interestingly, I went on and I did all those things. And here I'm sitting today having done all those things. And I think he was right. There is really no limit to what our brain can do. There's this concept of neuroplasticity, which means your brain has the ability to change. Your brain can improve and get better and bigger. And that's what I have devoted my research and clinical experience to. For the past 25 or 30 years, I've been studying neuroplasticity in the brain, and I have written lots of books on these topics. The 3 books I've written are shown here, and the most recent book is Boost Your Brain. We actually have a copy here for those of you who are interested. You don't need to get a copy of the book because I tell you everything you need to know that's important for brain function and improving your memory. I have also done lots of interviews in major networks around the country, and many of these are available in the YouTube channel for my neurology practice, which is Neurogrow Brain Fitness Center. My office is actually not far from here in McLean, and as Angela mentioned, I see patients with memory problems, attention deficit disorder, ADHD, insomnia, and anyone who wants to improve his brain function or her brain function. All right, so that was the information about my background. Now let me start talking to you about the subject of the seminar today, memory, how can we improve our brain and our memory. Before I do that, I want to tell you the basic anatomy of memory, attention, and decision-making in the brain. These things are actually not that complicated, and I will show you in simple terminologies how you can improve your brain function. Then I'll talk to you about the effects of aging on the brain, and then I'll tell you the 6 ways you can sharpen your memory and your brain overall, and I will tell you about the brain fitness program that I have put together. So the 2 parts of the brain that are important for learning and memory are hippocampus and cortex. The hippocampus is the size of your thumb, is one on the right, one on the left, and this part of the brain is important for short-term memory. Cortex is at the outer layer of the brain, and this is a part of the brain that's important for long-term memory. So let's do a little exercise together. I want you to think of the house you lived in when you were in elementary school. Just go ahead and do it. I want you to picture the kitchen, the entrance, the backyard. Do you see it? The function of the brain that you used here was long-term memory, and it depends on the functioning of the cortex. So cortex is a part of the brain that helps you remember your elementary school, the things you've done throughout your career, and other long-term recalls. Now, hippocampus is particularly important because it helps you memorize things. So if you were to memorize my last name, which is the spelling of my last name, which is Fotuhi, you will use your hippocampus. So let's actually do that. I want you to memorize the spelling of my last name. Are you ready? It's Fotuhi. And Angela doesn't know this, but whoever can remember the correct spelling of my last name, at the end of my presentation, will get a check from Angela for $10,000. So remember this. Angela's laughing next door. All right, so hippocampus is called hippocampus because of its resemblance to a seahorse. The old anatomist who took the brain out and dissected it came across this brain structure, and they're wondering what they should name it. And they decided to name it seahorse because of its curvature. Hippocampus is the Greek word for seahorse. Now, if you take hippocampus and slice it and look under a microscope, this is what you'll see. You'll see this row of beautiful neurons, each of which has a center on top and a tail that goes down. And these extensions go on then to bundle up and connect with cortex and other parts of the brain. So this is hippocampus, and this is the cortex on top. And this is the part of the brain that is critical for short-term memory and learning new things. All right, now that you understand the anatomy of the brain with regards to memory, which is the hippocampus is important for short-term memory and the cortex is important for long-term memory, let me tell you what happens to the brain, and especially these 2 structures, with aging. And here's the bad news. The bad news is that hippocampus and cortex shrink faster than the rest of the brain as we grow older. In fact, they atrophy by about 0.5% per year after age 50. And as you get older, this shrinkage in the cortex and hippocampus result not only in loss of memory, but in you having difficulties with sustained attention and processing information quickly. So as you grow older, other brain functions are affected as well, although the main complaint and the main issue for most people is memory. Now, I want to briefly mention the difference between memory loss, a condition called mild cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's disease. Memory loss is when you forget things. You forget your keys, you forget conversations, you forget names of people you meet. Sometimes you forget appointments or you forget important conversations. However, you only have memory problems. Alzheimer's is when you have so much memory and other cognitive issues that you become demented. You would get lost in driving in familiar roads. You forget names of family members. You cannot take care of your finances. You cannot work. And that's Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia. There's a condition in between, which is called mild cognitive impairment. Patients who have mild cognitive impairment have significant memory problems, but they still can function. The difference between MCI and Alzheimer's is that by the time you cross the line and become demented, you cannot function anymore. So MCI patients may be able to pay their bills and travel. They just find it more difficult, but they still can do it. And that's the distinction between mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. Now, with aging, there is some degree of memory loss and cognitive decline, shown here with green arrows. But for some patients, this arrow declines sharply to MCI and then to dementia. The goal in life is to try to keep it at the green line, where you may have memory problems, but you function quite well. You travel, you work, you take care of your finances and other affairs. And the challenge is to understand, why is it that some people go from this preclinical normal aging to this abnormal aging, where people develop mild cognitive impairment or they go on to become dementia? Why is it that some people have this sharp decline and some don't? Well, this is where I have spent most of my life studying, and I've summarized what I found in this diagram here. It turns out that when people have memory problems, they think of Alzheimer's disease. Technically speaking, Alzheimer's disease is a disease that affects the cortex and hippocampus, and it makes it shrink by a lot. And this shrinkage is because there are certain proteins that clump up. They become like a piece of gum in the brain, and that triggers inflammation, and that's bad for the brain. But it turns out that so much of the shrinkage that happens in the cortex and the hippocampus is not directly related to Alzheimer's. It's related to things like insomnia, sleep apnea, obesity, smoking, diabetes, stress, depression, and concussion. And the older you get, the less relevant Alzheimer's becomes. If a 55-year-old becomes confused and cannot function, he or she may have Alzheimer's disease. They have this collection of proteins in the brain that destroy cortex and hippocampus. But when an 85-year-old loses their ability, his or her ability to function, they often have a lot of problems. They have like a soup of problems. And Alzheimer's is not the really main contributor to why they have become demented. It's because they have multiple strokes in the brain due to their vascular risk factors. It's because maybe stress and depression have caused damage to their brain over the years. And Alzheimer's is really less of an issue by the time they get to their 80s. All right, now let me give you some scientific evidence for these statements I just made. All right, this slide shows the relationship between the size of the hippocampus and depression duration. And it looks like the longer a person is depressed in terms of years, the more the hippocampus shrinks. If you've had a depression for, let's say, 3 years, not much shrinkage. But if you've had depression for 5 years or 10 years, there's a lot more shrinkage. So the longer you're depressed, the worse your memory gets. So in fact, if you worry about Alzheimer's, you're expediting the process. You're making your hippocampus shrink faster, which means you will lose your marbles. Now, another finding is the link between hippocampus volume and the body mass index or obesity. The more, the bigger the belly, the smaller is the brain. Unfortunately, that holds true at any age, even for teenagers. Stress is bad for the brain, and here's a relationship between cortisol levels, which is a measure of stress, and hippocampus volume. The higher level of stress, the more your hippocampus shrinks. Finally, this is the link between hippocampus volume and years of insomnia. If you have slept fewer than 6 hours a night for 1 or 2 years, your hippocampus volume is normal. But if you have had insomnia for 20 years, your hippocampus would be much smaller. Clearly, lifestyle choices, how you feel, how much you eat, how stressed you are, can make a profound impact on the volume of your hippocampus and the cortex, which are critical for whether or not you remain sharp. Concussion is bad for the brain. If you have one concussion, you recover, but if you've had dozens of concussions, the chances are that you may not fully recover. When you have a traumatic brain injury, your brain hits the skull and causes bruise and inflammation. And when it bounces back, the back of the brain gets inflamed and bruised. And these can have an effect in the brain and can literally shrink the hippocampus deep in the brain. I want you to pay attention to this slide, and I'm going to ask you a question on the differences between these three groups of individuals. Researchers wanted to know whether playing football can contribute to shrinkage in the hippocampus, and whether those who have more concussions will have a smaller hippocampus. So they divided a group of college students in three groups: those who don't play football, those who play football but don't report having had concussions, and those who have had several concussions. This shows the average volume of hippocampus on the left, the average volume of hippocampus in college students who did not play football, and this shows the volume of hippocampus in college students who played football and had concussion. Let's call this one A, this middle one for people who played football and did not have a concussion, B, and last group C. Now look carefully. Which hippocampus is bigger, A or C? You can see this. So the hippocampus in college students who play football and have concussions is clearly much smaller than hippocampus in college students who don't play football. They do not play contact sports, they do not have concussions. It's a huge shrinkage in hippocampus, and it's linear. The more concussions the college students have, the more likely they are to have a small hippocampus. All right. So these were the bad news: insomnia, depression, obesity, concussions. They all shrink the hippocampus and the cortex, which then causes us to have more memory problems. All right. Well, that was the bad news. The good news is that there are many things we can do to reverse this process. And that's what's so exciting. It looks like we can indeed reverse the process, and we have solid science to support that. Let me explain. Your brain is made up of a lot of blood vessels. This shows what would happen if you take a brain of someone who's passed away and add a chemical that would dissolve the brain tissue and then inject something in the arteries so it would make them look red. As you can see, a substantial part of your brain is made up of blood vessels. In fact, a third of your brain is made up of blood vessels. So anything that increases blood flow to the brain is good for you, and anything that reduces blood flow to the brain or causes injury to blood vessels is not good for you. So we talked about, for example, obesity being bad because obesity can impart cause atherosclerosis, which narrows these arteries and there's less blood to the brain. But there are things you could do to increase the health of the blood vessels and literally the volume of the blood vessels. And number one on that list is exercise. The more you exercise, the bigger your hippocampus will be. Researchers wanted to know whether walking 45 minutes a day, 3 times a week, can increase the volume of hippocampus. So they asked for volunteers who did not exercise at baseline, and then they put them in 2 groups. One group was told to walk 45 minutes 3 or 4 times a week, and the other group was asked to do what they always did, which is just watch TV, walk to the work area, or do other chores around the house or around their work environment, but do not necessarily go out of their way to exercise. And they monitored them at 6 months and 1 year with MRIs. They measured the volume of MRI in these 2 groups, and they found that after 1 year, the group that had walked 45 minutes 3 or 4 times a week had significantly larger hippocampus than a group who had a sedentary lifestyle. They all started at around the same time, same size of hippocampus. One group experienced a usual 0.5% shrinkage that happens to their brain, and the other group literally grew their brains. This is so amazing that such a simple intervention, such as walking without vigorous exercise or running a marathon, can improve the volume of the hippocampus and in turn improve memory and other cognitive abilities. Now, what if you said, look, I want to just do vigorous exercise for 3 months? Would vigorous exercise for 3 months result in a bigger hippocampus as well? And to their surprise and to my surprise, they actually did. These figures show an example of a participant in that group. The MRI here shows the hippocampus outlined in blue. This is side view of the brain. This is the eye. This is the back of the brain. This is the nose. This is the top. This is where it goes to the neck. And this is side view of the hippocampus, which is roughly the size of your thumb. And this is a cross section. This is like cutting it across. As you can see, here's hippocampus volume, pretty normal. And here's side view is pretty normal. And after 3 months of exercise, it looks like the volume of hippocampus has grown. Look at this on top, an A. And this is the same individual 3 months after vigorous exercise, which in this case was a stationary bike 4 times a week. And whether you look at it sideways or cross-section, B and D show before and after images, and as you can see, hippocampus is bigger here than here. This is really exciting because it shows that the improvement in brain volume and function can happen in a matter of weeks and in a matter of 2 or 3 months. This is called neuroplasticity. This is called how you can improve your brain function and the size of your brain through lifestyle changes. What else can you do? Another important factor for your brain health is food, what you eat. Obesity is definitely bad, but let's say you eat in a healthy diet, balanced diet, don't eat too much, but what would you eat? What food is best for brain health? It turns out Mediterranean diet is really good because Mediterranean diet is in part rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are vitamins that are really good for your brain. In fact, one group of researchers looked at the link between how much omega-3 fatty acids individuals have in their blood and the size of their hippocampus, and it turns out that those who have higher levels of these omega-3 fatty acids, those who eat a Mediterranean diet and or take omega-3 supplements, have a bigger hippocampus. The dose of omega-3 fatty acids that I recommend to my patients is between 1,000 to 1,500 milligram a day. So you need to exercise and you need to eat a heart-healthy diet, such as a Mediterranean diet, and make sure that you take omega-3 fatty acid supplements, about 1,000 to 1,500 milligram a day. The third thing that's really good for the brain is learning new things. The more you learn, the bigger your hippocampus gets. This study, researchers looked at the volume of hippocampus in medical students who are preparing for the exam, and they realized that when they study hard for 3 months, the hippocampus literally grows. And here it's shown here. This is at the beginning, and then 3 months later. And when the students had stopped studying because they took their national board and they passed it and they were now just relaxing in the summer, they noticed that the hippocampus had continued to grow. And this suggests that the anatomical changes that happen in the brain with learning start the growth of new neurons or expand the volume of existing neurons, and these in turn can continue to flourish even after the intensive brain training. It's like people who go for vigorous exercise and burn calories, but when they stop exercise, they're still burning calories. All right, so we talked about exercise, and we've talked about diet and learning things. Another important factor for better quality of brain and a healthier, stronger, bigger brain is good sleep. Sleep apnea shrinks the brain, and when you treat the sleep apnea, your hippocampus grows back. Now, what is sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is a condition in which a person may feel tired during the day, and in the afternoons they may doze off like this. So if they're watching a seminar at this point, they will be dozing off. So if you've done that, chances are that you may have sleep apnea. They're often overweight. The size of their neck for men is more than 17 and a half, or 17 or 17 and a half, and for women is 16 or 16 and a half or larger. I had a patient who was a truck driver, and I said, sir, when you drive on highways, do you ever doze off like this? And he said, not often, which is surprising because, if you doze off, you shouldn't be driving. This is very common, and a lot of times people think snoring or having sleep apnea is an inconvenience, but it's actually a serious matter. It increases risk of strokes and heart attacks, and it can shrink your brain. And again, the good news is that when you treat the sleep apnea with a mask called CPAP, and you lose weight, your brain grows. This MRI shows before and after treatment with CPAP, and the hippocampus grows when the brain gets more oxygen. All right. Another important factor is meditation. Stress is bad for the brain, but the reverse of that is true. Lack of stress or reducing stress is really good for the brain. In this study, researchers looked at the MRIs before and after 3 months of meditation, and they found that hippocampus grows after 3 months of meditation. And in fact, it's so big, you can actually see it on MRIs of these individuals. Okay, now a new finding, which I find quite fascinating, is that when you have a sense of purpose in life, you have a healthier brain. Those of you who do volunteer work, who feel passionate about the environment, who go out of your way to start a hobby and excel in it, those of you who have a sense of passion, a sense of purpose, have healthier brains. Well, we knew that for long time. It just makes sense that if you have a driven life, you enjoy what you're doing, you have a healthier life. But what's interesting is that people who have a sense of purpose in life are less likely to develop symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss and confusion, even if they have Alzheimer's pathology in their brain. Yeah, so the individuals who have a sense of purpose in life are more resilient to amount of pathology in their brain. They can function better for a certain load of these plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's compared to those who don't have a sense of purpose in life, those who are not passionate about what they do. This may be in part because people who do have a goal and they're pursuing a goal and they wake up and they have things to do, they often have less stress and they feel satisfied by reaching their goals. This may be one reason why their brain is healthier and why they're more resilient. But it's definitely a fact that people who have a sense of purpose in life have healthier brains. There's less shrinkage in the brain, and they're more resilient to the effects of Alzheimer's pathology. So these are all good things. So what's the best age to start eating better, exercising, learning a lot? I think the best age is when you're in elementary school. And this is a picture of my family when my daughters were in elementary school. This is my wife and two daughters. And ever since they've been 7 or 8 years old, they have listened to my lectures and they're expert on this topic. In fact, my little daughter Maya sometimes uses some of my own teaching against me. Once I told her, Maya, you have a book review that's due in 2 days and you haven't even started working on it. And she said, Dad, you're stressing me out and that's not good for my hippocampus. So I need to be careful what I tell them and make sure that I keep their stress levels low, which fortunately they're doing a good job in that regards. My recommendation is not only you should follow those lifestyle changes we just discussed for yourself, for your spouse, but you should also encourage your children or your grandchildren to do the same. The sooner they start, they have more time to build a stronger brain reserve. When you exercise a lot, you grow new neurons, you have more synapses, more blood vessels. When you learn new things, you have more synapses. When you sleep better, you have a healthier brain, more oxygen to your brain. And by the time you get to your 70s, you have maintained a tip-top brain. Just like the more you exercise and you're physically strong, you're more likely to stay strong in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. All right, so let's say that, you, for whatever reason, you were smoking, you had obesity, you've been stressing too much, you only sleep 4 hours a night, and you're in your 60s. Now what? Well, the good news is that your brain has neuroplasticity, your brain has ability to change at any age. This neuroplasticity doesn't stop working when you get older. I have actually put together a program called Brain Fitness Program. And this program is based on all the important subjects I've been telling you about, is to help patients who already have memory loss or mild cognitive impairment to reboot their brain and grow their brain back. The way the program works is to first do an evaluation, then provide this treatment, and at 3 months measure the size of the hippocampus and how well they did over the time period. So let me tell you about one of my patients. Carol was 69 years old, and she was brought to me by her sister who was concerned about Alzheimer's disease for her. They told me that Carol, for months, has been sitting at home doing nothing. She was watching television all the time, or as her sister put it, she said the TV watches her because she just sits there. She doesn't talk, she doesn't do much, she doesn't remember anything. And so they were concerned that she has Alzheimer's disease, and they just wanted me to confirm the diagnosis so that they could obtain power of attorney, sell her house, and pay for her to live in a nursing home. And when I saw her, I thought, 69 is fairly young, and her level of dementia was out of proportion to her young age. And so I did my usual evaluation. Does she have sleep apnea? Yes, she did. Does she have depression? Yes, she did. The one thing I didn't mention is medications. She was on pain medications for her back pain, and they were making her drowsy. She was like on 6 pain medications, and many of them make you groggy and drowsy. So I started to treat her sleep apnea, I started to treat her depression, I tapered her medication, and we put her in this program. The program is twice a week for 12 weeks and includes neurofeedback, which is a form of biofeedback to improve brain function, to improve attention and memory, as well as reducing insomnia and anxiety. We do brain training, both with giving you a list of 100 words to memorize, but also with other brain games. We do teach our patients how to meditate. We talk to our patients about diet and what they should eat or they should not eat. We encourage them to exercise, and we monitor their improvement with their fitness, and we check them every week. We expect them to get 1 notch better every week. So we did all of these things for Carol. And I remember that as we tapered her medications and she became a little more alert, she started to walk more briskly when she would come to our office. And then soon she started to actually exercise. She joined a gym. And by 6 weeks, she was already talking more and she was more engaged. And by the time she completed our program, 12 weeks, she was a new person. She was full of life. She was looking for a job, and there was no resemblance to the Carol we had seen. She enjoyed doing brain games on her laptop, and she actually had started a new relationship. Her husband of many years had died, and then she actually got in touch with a boyfriend she had in high school, whom she loved, and turned out that he was available. So they started dating. You know, he was in California, she was in Baltimore. So it was a little long distance relationship, but eventually he came. When we looked at Carol's MRI, we could see significant improvement in her overall brain. This is her MRI before. You can see a lot of shrinkage, a lot of black spaces, which is empty spaces. And then after the program, her cortex had improved. And then the volume of her hippocampus had grown significantly. In fact, it had grown by about 8.6%. Now, Carol would come see me every 3 to 6 months. And a year later, she said, Dr. Fotuhi, do you think my hippocampus is still big? Or maybe after I finished the program, it went back to its original size. So we did that. We actually measured, we did another MRI in 1 year. And we saw that her initially, the volume of her hippocampus was 7.29 centimeter cube. After 1 year, had increased by 8.6%, which is almost like 17 years younger in brain age. And after she finished the program a year later, she had actually increased her hippocampus by 1 more percent. So she had continued to grow her brain. We provided this program for 127 other patients, and we found that 84% of patients had significant improvements. I published these findings in the Journal of Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease, and later this was featured in an article in Time magazine in 2016. So, in summary, many factors can shrink your hippocampus, things like concussion, stress, anxiety, insomnia, sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, depression. They all can reduce the volume of your cortex and hippocampus, maybe by 5% or 10%. But if they're all together, they can cause a major problem. However, the good news is that you can change your brain anatomy by exercising, sleeping well, eating a brain healthy diet, challenge your brain, meditate, and have a sense of purpose in life. So I hope I have convinced you that neuroplasticity is a real thing. Your brain can change for better or for worse. If you have a lot of medical conditions that are not treated, your brain will shrink. Now, if you have diabetes and it's well treated, then it's the same as almost if you didn't have diabetes. If you have sleep apnea and it's treated, that's a good thing. It's almost like you didn't have sleep apnea. But if you have all those conditions and they're not treated, your brain is going to shrivel, your brain's going to shrink. The good news is that you can reverse the process. You can do these things we just talked about and gradually grow your brain back. And in 3 months, with this intensive brain training, you can increase the volume of hippocampus by about 3%, which is equivalent to have a brain that's 6 years younger. We know this is a fact because we provide this program for our patients, and it's rare for someone not to improve. I thank you all for listening to my presentation and following along with me for these slides. I want to thank Angela and Kensington community for arranging this presentation, and I'm now available to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fotuhi. We had a couple of questions come through. So one of the first questions that we had is, how much is hereditary, and are pharmas still looking to decrease plaque in the brain?
Yeah, as you get older, there is less contribution from genes and hereditary factors. Let me just give you exact numbers. If you have a family member who has late onset Alzheimer's disease, let's say your grandmother developed Alzheimer's disease in her 80s, your risk for Alzheimer's may increase by 2%. So let's say if everything goes just regular average for you, when you're in your late 70s or early 80s, there's a 2% chance of you having terrible memory and losing your marbles. And if you have a grandmother or mother or another family member, your risk would be 4%. But if you don't exercise, if you don't sleep well, if you stress too much at your work or at home, your risk is 16-fold higher. So your risk by the time you get older will be 32%, not 2%, not 4%, 32%. So hereditary is a contributing factor, but a very minor contributing factor in contrast to lifestyle modifications. And in terms of pharmacology, from pharmaceutical companies trying to shrivel away the plaques and tangles, they have done that, but they have not seen results. And that really confirms the diagram and the truth behind the diagram that I showed you. That diagram I showed at the beginning shows how there are multiple factors that can shrink your brain, and Alzheimer's is only one of them, and the older you are is less of a factor anyway. So if you wash away plaques and tangles, you still have the consequences of obesity, sleep apnea, hypertension, anxiety, poor diet, and each of those factors over decades have shriveled your brain. And so even if you take the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's away, your brain's not in good shape. Just to put an analogy, some people get 80s, they have a lot of wrinkles, and they feel older. And if you just remove the wrinkles, they don't become younger. That's not the problem. And what needs to be done is having a healthier brain from inside out. And diet, exercise, sleep, meditation, having a sense of purpose in life, keep your brain healthy. And the plaques and tangles are there, and removing them does not necessarily cure your symptoms.
Okay, thank you. So another question that came through, are omega supplements enough for fatty acids? This participant doesn't like seafood, and so are there other foods that you would recommend?
Yeah, you can get omega-3 fatty acids in eggs, in flaxseed, and in nuts. However, the amount of omega-3 fatty acids in those of food items is very low. It's like 20 milligram or 50 milligram. You need 1,000 milligram. I take omega-3 fatty acid supplements myself. You need about 1,000 to 1,500 milligram a day. And whether or not you eat seafood, I favor taking those supplements. Those are the best brain vitamins. I did a research study myself. We published it in Nature about 10, 15 years ago. And we found that people who had higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids were less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. And this is consistent with hundreds, if not thousands of other studies that have supported the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids. So if you don't like seafood, you can take omega-3 fatty acids. Even if you take seafood, when you have a piece of salmon, that's about 300 milligram of omega-3 fatty acids. So even if you eat a seafood, you eat salmon or other seafood, you still need to take a supplement.
Thank you. The next question is, as the hippocampus grows, can old memories become more accessible, or is it only that your new memories will be more accessible?
That's an excellent question. The old memories, we believe, is stored in your cortex. And when you have a better cortex, you should be able to remember more things. And when you grow your hippocampus, you should be able to learn new things and remember more things. I don't know of any study that looked at whether or not increasing the size of your cortex and hippocampus will help you remember more details from the past. I would think that would be the case, but I have not actually seen that study. Okay. It's definitely the case that when you grow hippocampus, it's not like you have access to short-term memory. You are more likely to remember things better. What many of our patients who do our brain fitness program tell me is that they can learn things without much effort. Let's say you go to a party, a lot of people, and you're really trying hard to remember their names. When you do things that improve the volume of hippocampus, then you find that you can remember their names without much effort because you have a bigger, stronger hippocampus. So your learning is better.
Perfect. Thank you for that. The next question is, how much is alcohol an impact on, how much does alcohol play a role? And this participant assumes that alcohol impacts sleep, and so would that impact the brain?
I'm not in favor of too much alcohol. Several studies over the years have suggested that drinking 1 glass of wine or other alcoholic beverages for women and 2 glasses for men may have some protective benefits for brain health in the long term. However, there's also compelling evidence that too much alcohol is bad for your brain. And if you drink 4 or 5 or 6 alcoholic beverages per night, or if you do binge drinking on weekends and you have 10, 15 glasses of different alcoholic beverages on weekends, your brain shrinks significantly. In fact, just too much alcohol by itself can make you become demented. So in general, I don't recommend drinking alcohol unless you do everything else right. If you're exercising, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you can treat yourself to occasional glass of wine or other alcoholic beverages you like. But if you have memory problems, you should not have a drop of alcohol. Not a drop of alcohol if you think your memory is not good. And I do that for my patients. So sometimes I have someone who's like 72 years old, who's been drinking for a long time. They enjoy their stiff vodka or whiskey or they usually have 2 glasses of wine with dinner, and they come and they tell me their memory is not good. They're forgetting things, and the family is wondering whether or not they have Alzheimer's disease. And I tell them to taper the alcohol drinking gradually. I usually don't tell them to stop suddenly, because if someone has had too much alcohol for too many years, stopping it suddenly can increase the risk for seizures. And within a matter of months, they perk up. I had a patient who had come from overseas to see me, and they were convinced that he had Alzheimer's disease. He was a very successful businessman who was confused, irritable, and he had been drinking all his life. And I told him not a drop of alcohol, and we gave him some medications to sort of ease the effect of stopping his alcohol in a matter of weeks to months. And he became a new person. His wife said, "Oh my God, I love this man. For all these years, I was scared of him. He was so grumpy and irritable, and he was so forgetful. And now he's a pleasant man, and his memory is better. It's like he's back." And the main thing for him was stopping alcohol.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We have a few more questions. Is there a test that one can do at a younger age, such as in their 50s, to see if they're prone to any cognitive disease, especially if mother and father both had Alzheimer's?
Yes. There are standardized neurocognitive tests which measure your memory, attention, concentration, processing speed, executive function. These paper, pencil, or these days mostly computer-based tests establish your level of brain function as compared to people your age. And if your cognitive abilities are far below where it should be, that just means something is not right. It doesn't mean that you have Alzheimer's disease. It could be that you're drinking too much alcohol, you're not sleeping, stressing too much, and it gives you opportunity to do something. I do cognitive testing in my office routinely. And by the way, everything we do is covered by main insurances. I don't accept Medicare, but all other insurances do cover neurocognitive testing. And I find it helpful because when we find someone's memory is not good, we give them brain training and we improve their memory, and then they forget about Alzheimer's, because the reason for the memory loss was not the fact that their parents had Alzheimer's disease. It had to do with the fact that they were not sleeping well, or they were not eating well, or they were obese, or their sleep apnea was not treated. A lot of people have sleep apnea and they snore at night, don't get treatment, and that's unfortunate. So neurocognitive testing is a good thing. I do not recommend genetic testing. We don't know all the genes that can increase the risk of Alzheimer's. So if you have a genetic testing and it's negative, it doesn't mean you're off the hook, because we don't know if there's a gene associated with Alzheimer's that we're just not testing. And if the test is positive, it often tells people that they're at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't mean they will definitely get it. So if something increases the risk of Alzheimer's by, let's say, 20%, does it mean you will definitely get it? No, there's an 80% you won't get it. But to the patient who gets that answer, that's like a death sentence. I had a patient who actually came from Florida to see me, and she had a gene called apolipoprotein E4. And that increases the risk for cognitive decline in Alzheimer's anywhere from 6 to 10 folds. So a 2% risk can become like a 20% risk. And she was told that, she's at high risk for Alzheimer's. And when she came and I evaluated her and we did a neurocognitive testing, she remembered, I gave her 12 things to memorize, and she remembered all 12 things right in front of me. And we did other tests, and she aced all of them. And she was 82 years old already. I said, "Ma'am," her name was Jean. I said, "Jean, you don't have Alzheimer's disease. You're 82. Your memory is better than most 50-year-olds, most 30-year-olds for that matter. You don't have Alzheimer's disease. You have one gene that increases your risk, but you probably have 20 genes that protect you. And you don't know, we don't test for those other genes because we don't know all of them." So I don't favor genetic testing, and I do favor neurocognitive evaluation. This test is available everywhere around the world. There's a short version called MOCA, Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It takes 5 minutes and your local doctor can do it.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Just two more questions so far, and this next one is related to your program, and would it be suitable for a 79-year-old who is already living in assisted living and in mid-stage Alzheimer's?
I'm sorry to say no. By the time, one thing that happens is that a lot of people get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, but they really don't have it. Like Carol. Carol had medication side effects, she had depression, she had sleep apnea. She really didn't have the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's disease. And so she was, if they had taken Carol to any other neurologist, she would have most likely been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease because she was confused, she wasn't doing anything. So I would say in about half the time, when I see patients with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, I don't agree with the diagnosis. But let's say that diagnosis is correct and somebody is already confused and doesn't know what year it is, and they can't draw a clock, they forget names of the family members. Unfortunately, too much of the brain has shriveled away, and it's really hard to get them back. Now, I say that with some hesitation because if I had unlimited resources, I would open a place and I would bring people such as the patient just mentioned, and I would give them intensive brain training and intensive diet, intensive exercise, and I would see how they do in a matter of 3 to 6 months. It's possible that in 6 months, their Alzheimer's is less severe, but we don't know that for now. I think just to mention one little plug for you, at Kensington Assisted Living, you provide so many opportunities for your members. They can take classes, they can form clubs, and you do have a lot of programs. So once I get older, I'll probably consider coming here.
Well, we would love to have you, Dr. Fotuhi, in the far, far, far future. So there's a couple more questions coming in. One of the ones that we got is related to Parkinson's disease. And is Parkinson's disease a factor in decreased brain functions? Can that be helped by the 6 factors that you discussed? Or do you have anything more specific that you can advise for those living with Parkinson's?
Patients with Parkinson's disease suffer from a degeneration in the part of the brain that's important for balance, walking, and speaking, and spontaneous movements such as swallowing, eating, walking, and so forth. It turns out that the best intervention to slow down the rate of Parkinson's disease is exercise. Nothing else has been shown to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease from mild level to moderate level. The 6 steps that I mentioned are good for everyone, regardless of their diagnosis, whether they have Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, lupus. Sometimes I have patients with multiple sclerosis who come to our program and they do benefit. We have patients with stroke who come and benefit. The things I told you are universal. Those are inherent properties of the blood vessels and brain cells and how they interact with each other. To do those things is a no-brainer. There's no one who cannot benefit from them. So I do recommend them for all patients, including patients with Parkinson's disease.
All right, so the last question is, do you believe in other brain supplements that are on the market?
No. And this is my personal opinion. There's a supplement called Prevagen, which does not have any scientific evidence that's published to support any benefits they may or may not have. And I'm always surprised how they've been growing in size, and obviously they're doing well because I see the commercials all the time. To my knowledge, they have not had a published study to show that their supplement is good for the brain. They talk about a study they did in-house in their own company, and the results were good, but those results were not published. There are probably 200 to 500 supplements that have been mentioned to be good for the brain, and each of them has some benefits, but hardly any of them have placebo-controlled studies. The only one I know of is the omega-3 fatty acids. My general recommendation to patients who ask this question is to try the supplement and see if it helps you. You know, ginkgo biloba was a popular supplement for decades, and still a lot of people take it, and some people swear by it. My recommendation is you like it, try it. If you think it's helping you, then it's good for you. Also remember that people are different. So for example, if a patient has B12 deficiency and they take a B12 supplement, they will see a huge benefit. Whereas 90% of people who don't have B12 deficiency, if they take a B12, they will not see benefit. And therefore, not all supplements are necessarily good for everyone. And the only exception is the omega-3 fatty acids, because they are the molecules that form the lining, the outer lining of the brain cells. 40% of brain cells, the outer layer of the brain cells called membranes, are made up of omega-3 fatty acids. 40%. Therefore, if you want to grow your brain, you need the bricks. You need the ingredients that form the lining of the blood vessels for them to grow. And that's why I think omega-3 fatty acids are the best supplements. And the other supplements may or may not be as good. And if you think it could help you, take it for 3 months. If it helps you, then good. If not, then you should consider switching to something else.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Fotuhi.
Sure, my pleasure.
And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. If anybody has any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them to us and we will make sure we get them to Dr. Fotuhi. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation and we hope that you all have a good evening. Thank you so much.